Look, Gen Z isn't lazy. We're just tired of being lied to. They call us crazy. They call us lazy because we stopped feeding a system that's designed to harvest us. We aren't lacking drive. We're lacking interest in a lie. Gen Z isn't lazy. We're just the first generation to audit the building and realize the foundation is organized in crime. Let's talk about why we're actually just unplugging. Now, I understand that, especially here in the Western world, the US, and especially within the European diaspora, when you look at the statistics and when you look at, Gen Z, you look at how we're one of, I think, yeah, like the highest generation in unemployment. And we just look at like the structures of how things are, and we look at just that high rate, and then you also look at the high rate of like people who aren't having children, who aren't actually like wanting to like see a future. I began to honestly understand the mechanics behind it, and it wasn't from a space and a place of like we're lazy. Now, will I say some individuals are mentally checked out? I think all generations are, but especially us being right here in the midst of it, for one being the young adults and some who are yet to be an adult but are going to, there is a spotlight on us because people realize, you and I know, Gen Z is the future within the next, like I said, 10 to 20 years. We're the quote unquote adults of this realm. So we need to be very mindful of the world in which we want to have, because ultimately, I don't want to be like negative or, eventually these politicians, the Donald Trumps of the world and the people who are in their 80s, and they're going to pass away eventually. So you have to honestly realize, like, hey, especially if you're Gen Z, especially if you're even a bit younger, like, hey, like the future is ours. Meaning, what type of future do we want to cultivate? Because what older generations are saying, they're telling us like, we're not motivated, we're not interested. Well, can you also kind of see why? It isn't that we just woke up and we're like, man, I don't even want to participate. A lot of people woke up and it's like, man, why is it when I try to participate and when I seek to participate, I'm met with backlash, I'm met with confusion, and I'm met with just straight lies, and I'm just gaslit. So why would I want that all the time? So you gotta honestly look at the whole dichotomy behind why we even got here, and why like Gen Z, we're honestly looking at means and looking at ways through the internet of how we're going to break free from this. Because yes, we can all just be hopeless and like, oh my, but it's like, as long as you have a voice and as long as you are vocal, you have to continuously push this envelope and push this frequency. Because like I said, the ones, these people who are, as we deem elite or deem on top or deem the political power or deem like the power, they're going to age out eventually. It'll be the people that they associate with who may fulfill those roles. But we are a majority. So as the time progresses, us as the majority, we must establish ourselves and put ourselves in positions to be a voice, to be that advocate. Instead of people running with this narrative of like, oh, Gen Z is this and then Gen Z is that. No, we want it to be crystal clear. But it's like asking for something to be crystal clear is like asking for an alien entity to come down right in front of you and talk to you. We're not asking for that. Gen Z's not asking for crazy extravagant stuff. A lot of people, Gen Z, can't even afford housing just because the way it's designed to just extract and take as much out of you as possible, and then honestly just leave you with basically nothing after you done did everything. And then it's like, well, why don't you guys get into politics? Why don't you guys try to change things? The political system is built on sand. It's already sinking. So it's better we help it sink. We speak our truths. We see the things that are happening and allow it to sink. And us, the people, the majority, it's not a black, white, the majority, it's us as people to have the mental capacity and actually sit down and be like, the world in which we've had has been treacherous, has been just terrible, and it just, yes, there's goodness out there, but it's not on the forefront, number one. Number two, and a lot of it is just corrupt, you feel me? So it's like, a lot of Gen Zers agree with this. A lot of Gen Zers feel this, and a lot of Gen Zers have that conflict, especially with older gens. Thinking like, for instance, a lot of people in my family like, hey, like, why don't you have children yet? For one, it's not really something that I know I can't do and I would like to attain, but like a majority of Gen Zers, you're thinking of the stress of the financial responsibility. And then you're also thinking of the stress of like the environmental things and what's in the forefront and how you want to raise that child in a specific way, knowing that they're taking away some of the natural essence of how you want to raise that child. Unless you just, buy an island, no pun intended, Jeffrey Epstein, and just raise your child, which a lot of people would want to do. Having holistic communities where people actually want to be in an environment and be in a space and a place in which they would love to raise their child. They love to bring their child up into this world. A lot of Gen Zers are looking at the world and are seeing it and they're like, holy cow. We're just living lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And then as we receive these lies and we start to break them down and start to deconstruct them, start to have conversations, start to post videos, people are like, a lot of other generations possibly felt this way, but they didn't have the internet to express it. They probably had magazines, they probably had radio, but we're at a stage where like this tech is only advancing and this is only spreading more. We're in abundance of technology. We're in abundance of content, but this type of content, the content in which people's awareness is starting to rise, where people are starting to look at things like, like at my gen, we're just like, we don't want that. So rather than us, a lot of people quiet quitting. Oh, what's quiet quitting? SZMOVY, it's individuals, especially Gen Z, in which you're going to work and you're only doing exactly what you need to do and not anything more. And I get it, right? I don't want this to be deemed or cultivated as a standpoint of like being a lazy worker, but then at the same time, it's like, why give more to a corporation who can dispose you the next day? Corporations see you as disposable. It's always conditional. They're going to tell you, we love our staff, but hey, you can do 100 perfect things. The second you do one wrong thing, but you're out of there. It's conditional. It's all conditional. So it's like, people are even noticing that. Gen Z is like noticing even like the work scam and how like the structures, the way even our financial system behind things, it just doesn't make sense when you really look at it. I'm going to segue into these pillars. I honestly just want you guys to understand like why these things are true and why these things are why, at least me. And I've spoken with people within my generation. I've even spoken to those even above, you feel me? But it's like, I have this inner knowing, it's something about my generation that is really just not rocking with it. And I'd like to touch on what I have deemed the three walls, which I conceive as like the freeform pillars. The first one, I just think of it as like the wall of history. Get it? His story. Growing up, going to school, a lot of times, and even now, we're given a storyline and a history that is extremely skewed, right? And a lot of the information in there is misleading, and it really has us, when we thus go back and research and see the truth, we ask ourselves, like, why are they still constantly feeding us a lie despite all the evidence? Despite all the evidence, the things that have happened on the land of here in America, the genocide in Africa, and even the genocide in the United States, in this land, and the natural that were already here. So it's like, it's hard for us as Gen Zers to, trust this establishment when the history of this entire establishment is honestly based on extraction. And as the extraction of resources, for those who don't know, I'm Congolese. So it hurts me to know that my brothers and sisters work in mines with insufficient quality of work, insufficient healthcare, no nothing. So we can enjoy our iPhones, we can enjoy our Teslas and all of our smart devices. Like, that is a pillar, The other one is sedation. Basically, for individuals, we have the internet. The internet was given to us, but they legitimately thought that we were just going to use it to just consume, be sloths, which, don't get it wrong, I love to consume. I love to tap into content, But eventually, I also like to tap into knowledge and also information that's beneficial. But us Gen Z can see there's one side to the internet and then there's another side to the internet. So, once again, it's not that we don't care about our future. It's not that we don't care about what the future is to hold. We don't want to deal with the trickery and the lies anymore. Now, from there, my final wall that I want to, touch in on is that exit. Something that I've been feeling and something that I've been seeing is how we're going to establish a means in a way in which we're seeing what we seek and what we want, and we're building away from what's already established. We're not asking for a seat at the table with elites, which, I don't even think they're elite when, you know, half the things they do when they're not even telling us 1% of what they do. So, with that being said, I really want, other generations before us, and even those um, who are coming up, that we are in a very interesting time on the planet, and we need to be very mindful and we need to be very conscientious that we are the future. That being said, like, that's why I have so much conviction, and I feel like it's so important to just share. And like I said, like, I know there's Gen Zers out there thriving. You know what I'm saying? For me, in the position that I'm in a good position, but at the same time, I feel, I'm not a person who's like exclusively isolated. I isolate myself in my own identity and in my own frequency, but I can also tap into the environment and feel that distraught, feel that like heaviness, And it's like, wow, I'm like, holy cow, like what's going on? And like I said, it all stems back to that blindness, those pillars that I brought up, and how, when we look at those basic structures, just how tainted they are, and it's something that we know we have to have these conversations now, because as we progress through this future, which is AI driven, we need to start having these conversations, these talking points, and start congregating as, I would say, noble individuals. And what I mean by that are individuals who are approaching this knowing that it's from a parasitical standpoint and a generative standpoint. As those within Gen Z, I know a lot of individuals want to prosper and want to progress, but we know we're dealing with lies and we're dealing with trickery and we're dealing with a means that is just not true. And instead of them being like, you know what, dang, they do have the internet, like, dang, they have these things that they can read and learn, they're like, no, you're just crazy. We're not gonna take the gaslighting, bro. It's not gonna happen.